What is Surrealism? Surrealism was a movement in modern art that began in the early 1920s and gained momentum in 1924. It was a movement that sought to relate the creative potential of the unconscious mind. The Surrealist program was to tap into the unconscious mind, which was the source of creative and imaginative forces, in order to increase self-knowledge and confront people with their real nature. In other words, Surrealists sought to change society by breaking from traditional forms of thought.
Reaching the unconscious. The psychoanalytic technique of association was fundamental in automatic writing and also used in surrealist paintings to harbor images of the unconscious. The most prominent techniques used were the analysis/interpretation of dreams and the interpretation of recurring symbols. Due to the excitement created by the results of the first automatic writing, the surrealist group was led to seek more effective methods of stimulating the unconscious flow. Thus, they began to experiment with hypnosis and even hallucinogens to reach that state of altered consciousness and suspension of reality. An epidemic of trances broke out amongst the surrealists as a result. They also sought simulation in the mystery of sexuality, as well as nocturnal dreams, trances, and hallucinations and related states.
Stylistic elements of Surrealism. Surrealists were not so much focused on making their work beautiful, but instead their goal was to create writings and paintings that would explore the human mind and extend the investigations of Sigmund Freud. Breton stated that the automatic writing lies on the images brought about by the relationships that create a poetry of irrational juxtapositions that reflect unconscious thought. This poetic effect is convulsive beauty and the basis of surrealist aesthetics. Surrealist paintings include shocking, sexual, or violent imagery. It's not meant to be socially acceptable. When you see some surrealist paintings, you may find it terrorizing and appalling. For surrealists, eroticism was a central fact of human existence and the only thing that gave existence a meaning. Therefore, eroticism is a distinguishing feature of surrealist art. Many surrealist artists created paintings with a strong dreamlike sleepness sensation. They display images of impalpable figures and familiar landscapes onto a canvas showing a life before time. This style is commonly referred to as oniric, which means dreamlike, and was derived from the artist de Chirico. Even though all the surrealist artists created works that are strange and dreamy, each artist has their own style which sets their work apart from the others in the surrealist world. In fact, not all surrealist painters were drawn into the oniric style of painting. This new, distinct approach to the making of paintings from unconscious was known as, quite literally, automatic painting. The difference between oniric painting and the automatic was that automatic painting is spontaneous and oniric is of the actual execution. This new approach led to more abstraction, so that the precise imagery of oniric surrealism led to more signs and symbols. It was most likely influenced by Freud's theory that the unconscious thought expresses itself in symbols, where the subject of thought is forbidden.
Now you've learned about the elements of Surrealism, let's talk about the origins and how it came about. The Surrealist movement emerged from the Dada movement and began in 1924, around the end of World War I. It was basically a continuation of Dada, with many Dada artists becoming members of the Surrealist group. Dada and Surrealism were both widespread revolts by artists against the conditions of Western society that resulted from the absurdity of the First World War. Young people came back from the war in a state of stupefaction, and it was revolting to see the wasting away of human life and destruction brought about by the war. The fact that a society could commit such atrocity on such a high level appeared totally discredited in the eyes of people. The disgust and rage towards civilization and its materialist philosophies had to be expressed somehow, so naturally it extended to the arts. Thus, Dada and Surrealism were born. The object of the Dada movement was of destruction and of radical rupture with the past. They reveled in the chaos and fragmentation of modern life, whereas Surrealism's object was not to obliterate the past, but to offer positive alternatives to it. They sought to put people back in touch with the forces of the unconscious. However, both movements have a preference towards the spontaneous and the subconscious, rather than the rational conscious. They believed in art as a way to express humanity and true civilized values. The official creation of Surrealism began with the publication of the Manifesto of Surrealism, which was written by Andrew Breton, who was a founder and leader of the movement until his death in 1966. Breton wrote in the manifesto that people were still living under the rule of logic, and this absolute rationalism caused people to narrow their experiences. Due to the bounds of civilization, the progression of humanity has been diminished as people are forced to banish from their minds all thoughts that would be accused of being superstitious or a fantasy. People were to banish all methods of seeking truth that did not conform to tradition. Breton sought to break this tradition so that imagination could be on the verge of recovering its rights. He believed that if the forces of the unconscious mind is capable of reinforcing or combating those of the conscious mind, then it's in our best interest to capture them. So this became the Surrealist program, to tap into the unconscious in order to increase our self-knowledge and confront ourselves with our true nature. It was time to discover the truth. Breton envisioned a Surrealism union between dream and reality. In the Manifesto of Surrealism, he writes, "I believe in the future resolution of two states, dream and reality, which are seemingly so contradictory in a state of absolute reality, a surreality, if one may so speak." Before Surrealism came about, Sigmund Freud, a psychologist, elaborated on the theory that the mind is a complex energy system. His writings on dreams and the unconscious changed traditional ideas about the origins of visual imagery. In fact, Breton gives all credit for the creation of Surrealism to the discoveries of Freud. In order to achieve its goals, Surrealism adopted the strategy of pure psychic automatism, which was to be expressed either verbally or in writing so that it shows the real function of thought. That's right, despite what most people thought, Surrealism actually started out as a literary movement. In 1999, Philippe Saupoult started experiments in automatic writing, which was sitting down with a piece of paper and writing utensil and just writing without consciously thinking about what you had written. So essentially, he was a pioneer of the crucial technique of automatic writing. Automatic writers started this technique because they wanted to destroy bourgeois morality and class inequality. They wanted to upload freedom and imagination and release the energies of the psyche. He, along with poets, including French poets Louis Aragon and Paul Eluard, were influenced by Freud's work. As we have seen, the first application of Breton's pure psych automatism was in literature. At the time of the manifesto, Breton wasn't concerned with painting, and he did not believe the subconscious could be expressed through paintings. Painting proved to be an area of difficulty for surrealists, and it seemed impossible to produce automatic painting in the same way that automatic writing was. It's possible that Breton and other literary surrealists were too preoccupied with the idea of automatic writing that they failed to recognize the paintings of Ernst as surrealists. And boy, did he prove surrealist writers wrong.
Max Ernst grew up in a middle-class family of 9 in Germany in 1891. He first learned the art of the arts from his dad, who was interested in academic painting. But instead, Ernst studied psychology and physiology at the University of Bonn. He never actually received any real training in the arts, but was instead self-taught. But while at the university, he read 2 texts by Sigmund Freud that were of central relevance to Surrealism, one of them being the interpretation of dreams. After college, Ernst went on to spend 4 years in the army for Germany during World War I. This would later on go on to influence his work to show absurd and apocalyptic scenes. After the war, Ernst became a leader of the Dada movement. He succeeded in painting paintings that were visually equivalent to all the automatic poetry and writing. His bizarre but yet very precise images and strange juxtapositions, like automatic writing, reflected patterns of the unconscious thought more directly than ever before. Ernst's sources of inspiration included the psychoanalytic technique of free association as well as the analysis of dreams, procedure that Freud called the royal road to the unconscious. After this, Ernst went on to go to Paris and became one of the Surrealism's founding members. His first paintings were strongly dreamlike and are commonly referred to as oniric. Ernst recognized the importance of dreams and relevance to the unconscious. After this, he fled to New York after escaping from an internment camp for the 3rd time. He married a woman named Peggy Gunningham, who showed him the art world in New York. Ernst built on Freud's interpretation of dreams. For Ernst, dreams were puzzles, a free recreation of imagination. For him, it wasn't about analyzing and unveiling dreams, but about the added value of the dreams, the inexplicability caused by condensation and distortion. Ernst altered his style and approach to art many times throughout his career, and consistently questioned and reflected on art's potentials. He avoided anything that appeared habitual or tasteful and avoided the look or the norm at all possible and continuously contradicted the image people formed of him. Because of this, Ernst used many different techniques in his paintings. He is well known for a few, though. After fleeing to New York, he began experimenting with new painting process where he tied tin cans to string and let them swing over a canvas. After a while, his whole body would become involved in the movement. This movement was a reference to the potentials that mental automatism and automatic writing had opened up to the Surrealists from the beginning. This form was called oscillation. Another technique he developed was frottage, or rubbing, where he laid a paper on the floor and rubbing over it with a pencil to create textural effects. Emphasis on material contact and transforming everyday materials to create an image of collective consequence was important in the idea of automatism. He had one constant technique, which appeared throughout most of his life, which was that of collage. The combination of pieces into a piece, the inconsistent and irregularities combined into works that disturbed the viewer. Collages that could not be explained in any rational way. This technique was viewed as a crime, as one committing violence to nature when Ernst first started doing it. One of Ernst's paintings, Dream and Revolution, is a famous one. The dream part of it refers to the image on the right bottom side, which is Donald Duck, and also the monster, which is behind in the background on the left, which is from another one of Ernst's pieces. The revolution part of this image is referring to the Parisian cap, which is on top of Donald's head, which is a symbol of the French Revolution. This painting was made during the McCarthy era, while hysteria was among the people because of their smelling communism. The reference of revolution implies more than the freedoms Ernst took with respect to aesthetic conventions. Revolution implies a political stance and engagement. Another of Ernst's paintings, a very famous one, was his Europe After the Rain series. It was a series of visionary paintings while using his declamanio technique. Ernst sought to make his thoughts known. In the first piece, we see a land covered by stormy clouds and water from the stratosphere, a symbol of coming war after the rise of Hitler in Germany. Because of his experience in World War I, he opposed fascism and was against Stalin's Moscow trials. He was a true German nationalist. These feelings translated into his work. In this painting, it showed that civilization got a near-fatal blow from fascism and Stalinism. The second painting is a portrayal of a devastating attack on humanity and near destruction of an ancient civilization. Life forms emerge from the landscape to see what had been done, but are unable to understand the new environment. This piece is a portrayal of Ernst's feelings on the fate of human progress. Ernst used unorthodox and revolutionary methods to overthrow the classical artist's work. These techniques permitted the artist to enter a state of passivity/activity and exploit the workings of chance and spontaneity.
Early life. Juan Miró was born in 1983 in Barcelona, Spain. He held his very first solo exhibition in Dalmas Gallery in Barcelona. In 1924, the Surrealists took interest in Miró. He met Breton in 1925 and officially engaged in Surrealist events. From then, he learned to use the unconscious mind as a source of inspiration. Personality. Miró joined the ethical and aesthetic principles of Surrealism and agreed with its goals but never went along with Breton's full program. His attitude was always aloof, and he was never one to engage in political action or in technical painting issues. Whenever other Surrealists held their meetings, Miró rarely attended and took part in their quarrels. To him, going to a Surrealist meeting was like paying a visit to a relative. It was something a well-bred person did. Because Miro refused to intellectualize his issues or dramatize them, he was set apart from many of the Surrealists, and he was often treated with a type of consideration reserved for child prodigies. However, his ability to keep quiet proved beneficial. It preserved him from all the squabbles and inner divisions that the Surrealist artists went through. His silent thinking around his noisy friends allowed him to keep in counsel and find amazing ways to embark on poetic pictorial experiences that would take him to the boundaries of painting. He was able to go beyond painting, to a domain beyond. His goals were to push painting beyond the easel, to first create a response of physical sensation and then a great impact on the psyche of the viewer. In a realm of true surreality, a surreality that many surrealists merely recognized, Miro always cared more for painting than talking about it. He preferred exploring imaginary realms than speculating what he found. Style. The emergence of Miro was an important stage in the development of Surrealist art. Upon joining Surrealism, Miro gradually abandoned representative work in order to create more pictorial works. He was a major proponent of the automatic style of painting, which involved lots of spontaneous images characterized by symbols and signs. His work also had lots of color and archetypal elements, such as stars, birds, eyes, heads, and ladders. Miro also took signs from biology, primitive cultures, and from children's stories and fantasies to create his visions of richness and limpid wonder. He also used figures derived from Catalan folk art and was very fascinated with the Catalonian language. So, Miro's paintings look naive and almost childlike, but they're also very sophisticated. In all, Miro was always careful in maintaining a balance between autonomic expressive capacity, elements of painting, and the deep fascination of the actual images. In all his work, he took images from memory, the unconscious, dreams, and transformative modernist art processes in order to create childlike, innocent, and sophisticated art. Miro is known for automatic paintings, poem paintings, as well as ceramics, sculptures, and printmaking later on in his life. Automatic painting. Miro was said to be considered the most surrealist of them all because his paintings appeared much closer to automatic writing and therefore Breton's original definition of surrealism. He was extremely spontaneous with his work. He said, "Rather than setting out to paint something, I began painting. As I paint, the pictures begin to assert itself under my brush. The form becomes a sign for a woman or a bird as I work. The first stage is free, unconscious." Miro is said to have started painting around a blackberry jam stain accidentally spilt on his canvas. His paintings resulted from the hand's natural submission to internal impulses. In his work, you can see the suppression of descriptive details and vanishing form. A rise of emptiness is displayed. In order to create his paintings, Miro drew almost entirely from hallucinations. Hunger and overworking was a great source of hallucination. So at one time, Miro was living on a few dry figs a day in order to induce hallucinations. He would sit for a long period of time, staring at the bare walls of his studio, trying to capture the shapes on the canvas. Poem paintings. Miro is also known for his poem paintings, a style of painting that introduced words or phrases into the painting. He is quoted saying, "I make no distinctions between poetry and art." For Miro, poetry was a source of energy that he depended on until his final days. Poetry allowed him to clear his mind and his studio, so logically it was incorporated into his art. In fact, poetry surrealism, the glorification of symbolism and metaphors, influenced Miro more than dreams. Here are some of Miro's paintings. The first one is Maternity. When Miro painted maternity, his surrealist manner was fully evolved. Maternity is a very simplistic drawing, and it's full of symbols and signs. The female character is barely recognizable in the painting, but if you look again, you can see the profile of one breast and the full front view of another. From these breasts, you can see two children being nursed as they hover in the air. This painting is essentially that of a mother and a child, but Miro has eliminated all forms of realism and replaced it with abstract symbols. By stripping away excess representation, Miro is depicting the more emotional aspects of the relationship between a mother and its child. In all, the painting consists of biological signs that represent the fundamental life process, while set in a cosmic setting. This type of imagery was called biomorphic, and it became an important element in many surrealist paintings and sculptures. The next painting is Harlequin Carnival. Harlequin Carnival sums up a year of conquests in every domain, and it was one of Miro's most well-known paintings. Miro sums up a stage of his art in a single work, to show that he is ready to abandon the style. This particular piece sums up his style of imagination and discovery of the personal realm, a fantastic and joyous facility in the spirit of play. Next, Miro will develop Marvelous, a fantastic art. In the painting, we see a guitar-playing automaton and a mustached harlequin Catalan peasant playing a lead role. There's also a scatter of inventory, the cats playing with the wool, the birds laying eggs, and the window to the outdoors, and etc. It's an idealist composition that can only be read in close detail, and each form serves a double function. They particularize each function and also play a part in the whole painting. For example, the two large arabesques are the arms for one leading character and extend the body of another, but it's also the two essential axes organizing the painting. The brilliant colors used serve to particularize each form and make it stand out against the broken, murky, toned background, the gray, purple floors, and greenish walls. Repetition of color and distribution is carefully calculated and produces a rhythm in the piece. Also, each vertical movement is matched by a horizontal one, a rhythmic repetition. Miro might have used the strategy of organization to control the amount of detail in the painting. Lastly, Miro accompanied the painting with a surrealist poem that basically says, "The ball of yarn unraveled by the bat dressed up as a smoky harlequin twist and stab my guts during the period of hunger that gave birth to my hallucinations, recorded in this painting, beautiful bloomings of fish in a poppy field marked on the white pages, stuttering like birds' throats against the sex of a woman in the form of a spider." Influences. Miro's tiny forms in large spaces of color would go on to influence 20th century abstract artists such as Alexander Calder, Jackson Pollock, Roberto Matta, and Mark Rothko. He held a unique place between Surrealism and abstract expressionism and greatly influenced these New York school of painters in the 1940s and 50s and much more.
René Magritte. Early life. René Magritte was born to a wealthy manufacturer father in 1898. In 1912, when René was 14 years old, his mother committed suicide. She had been suffering from depression for an undocumented number of years and was so badly affected that she was usually kept in a locked room. One night, she escaped. She immediately went to the nearest bridge and threw herself into the river that flowed behind the property. It was days before her body was discovered, a mile or so downriver with her face covered. Therefore, veils, curtains, faceless people, and headless faces and torsos did become recurring themes in his paintings when he was older. René attended Académie des Beaux-Arts, where one of his classmates introduced him to Cubism, Futurism, and Purism, three movements he found exciting. When he graduated, he was ready to do commercial art. Although it was boring for him, he needed this job to pay his bills in the future. However, he was able to paint seriously. René Magritte considered his paintings to be a defiance of common sense. He wanted to show objects as they aren't, to provide a mystery, not a symbol, and to frighten the viewer into not understanding his images. His paintings were a combination of two things, a reflection of his real life and its events, and a chance to create a world and a wonderful set of imagery that does not occur in real life. Style. Many of the early works he did were reminiscent of the style in which Pablo Picasso painted. Much of the work created by René Magritte takes everyday, normal objects, and he would rearrange the figures and locations. Magritte was famous for the juxtaposition of objects during his time with the Surrealist movement. It was his customary style to place objects where they aren't usually found, or to combine two or more contradictory images together. Sometimes would use famous paintings, which were created by other artists, to put his own surrealist twist on them. Works and themes. He began to work with sculpting as well. Some of his favorite objects were floating rocks. He also liked creating a painting within a painting, and he also used many intimate objects within a human figure. Some examples of his work are rock floating like a cloud, an umbrella supporting a glass of water, a pair of boots with real toes, and some paintings playing with the idea of light and dark. The disturbing images from his mother's death were also snuck into some of his works, like the painting The Rape, which is on the bottom right-hand corner. The Son of Man. There is a man standing very erect with his arms tightly by his side. As mentioned earlier, Magritte liked to paint floating objects. In this case, he painted a floating green apple. About the painting, The Son of Man, 1964, Magritte said, "Everything we see hides another thing. We always want to see what is hidden by what we see, but it is impossible. Humans hide their secrets too well." Just like his mother's face was covered when she was found, the Son of Man's face was covered as well. The false mirror. The false mirror is an eye all by itself. If this isn't unsettling enough, there's also a sky placed inside the eye. Sometimes called magical realism, such juxtaposition of normally unrelated objects within seemingly context is characteristic of much of Magrette's style. This painting is basically Magrette's invitational to look at the world differently. There is no right or wrong to how this painting is analyzed. It is open-ended and requires one to use their imagination and creativity to create their own meaning. It tries to get the audience to look deeper into their unconscious. Future. Popular culture and the world in general were extremely influenced by his creative and unique ability to take something so ordinary, yet make viewers of his pieces see something completely different. His ability to present figures in a suggestive yet questioning manner made his work extremely desirable, especially during the 1960s. Salvador Dali. Early life. Salvador Dali was born on May 11, 1904. He was born into a powerful family due to the fact that his father was a politician. He began to show his artistic talent at a young age, therefore he was placed into a drawing class at age 10. He applied for admission to an art academy and was accepted. He attended this school where he met many people such as Pepin Bello, Luis Buñuel, and Federico Garcia Lorca. Dali, however, thought he was not challenged enough at this academy. He said that there was no one so competent to examine him and his work. He then got expelled. The things he said showed that he had a big ego. He was full of himself and thought that he could do no wrong. In 1928, he met Pablo Picasso and Juan Miró, who would be great influences on Dali's artwork. Styles. In the academy, Dali focused on Cubism. He was never taught Cubism, but got the idea from magazines. He thought that he could improve art, so he tried to improve art such as Impressionism, Pointillism, Futurism, Cubism, and Neo-Cubism. When he met Pablo Picasso and Juan Miró, he was introduced to Surrealism and the ideas of food. Dali was a big daydreamer, so he was amazed by this new form of art. Soon, his art began to show the influences of Surrealism, and nightmarish images started to appear in his works. The basis of Dali's work was an entirely personal inspirational system that he called the paranoid critical method, along with a high precision, ultra-illusionist technique. Great Masturbator. The Great Masturbator is a kind of psychic snapshot of the 25-year-old Dali. Dali was always driven by his sex appeal, and this was shown in many of his artworks, especially The Great Masturbator. This painting reveals his inner thoughts, his fears, personal anxieties, persistent obsessions. In the upper right-hand corner, there is a woman who seemingly has no clothes on, and her mouth is seductively near the private parts of a man. At the bottom, there's a giant grasshopper hanging off the bottom of a yellow rock. Dali was quite afraid of grasshoppers, so this grasshopper shows decay and death. The yellow rock was shown to be a kind of self-portrait of Dali. Today, it is in the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid, Spain. La Persistencia de la Memoria. La Persistencia de la Memoria, or the Persistence of Memory, is another one of Dali's artworks. Just like the yellow rock in The Great Masturbator, in the center of the Persistencia de la Memoria, there is another one of his self-portraits. The long eyelashes are said to be insect-like, or even sexual. The clocks represent time, but they represent the strange passing of time while dreaming. This is why they look molten. He shows the relationship between dreams and reality through the concept of time. The background is set in his hometown of Port Lilgat. He adds memories from his childhood, but makes it seem dry and dead because he had not visited since he was a child. Dali and Luis Buñuel. Dali aided Buñuel in creative surrealism movies like Un Chien Andalou, created by Buñuel and Dali in Paris during the time of the Lost Generation. The movie was inspired by a dream that Buñuel had about a cloud slicing the moon in half, which is why the famous scene of the eye slicing came from. It was his first film and was not supposed to make sense. No rationally explained scenes were accepted, and there was no real plot to it, just a bunch of scenes. He wanted only to spike a revolutionary shock into society, aimed not to please but instead to alienate viewers. Influences. Dali revealed the gap between reality and illusion. This influenced many modern artists. He is considered one of the major surrealists who used shock and unease to illustrate moments of pleasure. This is now quite contemporary. Painters such as Robert Motherwell admired Dali's way of personalizing the political and politicizing the personal.
Influences of Surrealism. It was Surrealism that led to the creation of abstract expressionism movement. Surrealism has revealed and made familiar to us the world of the unconscious. Through this, it has found a far-reaching influence on literature, theater, cinema, as well as painting, drawing, and sculpture, and even music. In fact, although Breton originally dismissed music as inferior to many types of sensation and spiritual realizations, Surrealism had an impact on postmodern music, considering the relationship between automatism and musical improvisation used in contemporary music. Varese, Cage, Leitz, Stockhausen, and Oliveros are known Surrealist composers. Stockhausen, in particular, attempted to advance into the area of musical unconsciousness by creating intuitive music. His pieces required musicians to play only if they reached a status of not thinking, which is a technique that grew out of automatic writing techniques. In America, an early and simple automatic style of music, which involved degrees of improvisation, started to appear in blues musicians and jazz bands. Improvisation led to a world of uncertainty. It can be argued that Surrealism was the one that spurred discoveries of psychoanalysis, which has been brought to a wide public and built into society today. Though initially, like other art movements, Surrealism created shock and confusion to the public as it brought people face to face with the mysterious unconsciousness. The images were so strange that people were unsure of what exactly was being portrayed. The discoveries of Surrealism eventually proved to be revolutionary. They focused on aspects of instinctual behavior and acknowledged what was most repressed in society, sexuality and its manifestations in man's addiction to violence and death.
Now that you've learned about Surrealism, it's your turn to draw a piece of Surrealist art now. On your sheet of paper, think of a dream that you've recently had. Try to illustrate it. Have fun!